Hello, everybody, and welcome to From My Heart to Yours. I'm Helen Hillix, intuitive counselor and spiritual coach, and I'm your host. And I'm so excited that you're here today. I love you, and I love my audience, and I just can't wait to connect to you again every single week. Today, I want to talk about how to stop overreacting. And what is overreacting to begin with? What is it? And how can we stop doing it? I mean, this is something that I know plagues all of us, whether we think we do it or we don't think we do it. We all overreact. And of course, we all think other people overreact and we don't. That is the funny part about it. And that's the way I used to think anyway, that I never overreacted, but everybody else did. So I want to give a few examples. I always like to tell some stories about real situations or hypothetical situations that can really help us relate to the topic of overreacting. So I've got a real live one that happened with my daughter. This was many years ago when she was in junior high. And she came home one day with her mid-semester, or I don't know, mid-quarter grades, and she'd gotten a D in something. I think it was math. And I immediately overreacted, at least in my mind. I wanted to say, what didn't study, or what's the problem? What do you think you're doing at school? And, thank goodness I didn't actually say these things out loud, but I had a lot of judgments, a lot of opinions, all flying around in my head about how poorly she was doing at school and what was the matter with her. And couldn't she do any better? And was she lazy? Had she tried? All these things, all these opinions and judgments flying around in my head. And that was definitely an overreaction. Now, would it have been more of an overreaction if I had yelled those things out at her? Of course it would have been. And many people do. Many people do. I have heard it so often from my clients over the years that their parents have yelled and screamed at them when they got a bad grade or lots of bad grades, whatever the situation was that they have yelled and screamed at them about. And that definitely is overreacting. But what we think about as overreacting is that it's a reaction that is not warranted by the severity of the situation. So this is one of the danger points, if you ask me, guys, because we can justify our reaction by saying, this is a big deal. Of course I'm upset. This is a big deal. Don't tell me to calm down. This is really important. And so we justify our reactivity by making the excuse that whatever has happened is a big deal. And so, of course, I'm going to react in a powerful way. Now, that's why I think it's dangerous, because the truth is, no situation warrants that kind of behavior. And I want to say it again. No situation warrants that kind of behavior. So the truth is, we need to redefine that overreacting and recalibrate it so that we are being accountable that any kind of quote unquote reaction is an overreaction. Now, on the other hand, I know that we're not the Dalai Lama, that we're not Jesus Christ. I know that we're all humans and that we are going to react at times. And we're going to, and therefore we are going to overreact at times. So I'm not crazy. I do know that we're not perfect, but it's very dangerous if we allow ourselves to think that if we can justify it, then there's no such thing as overreacting, because that just leads to justification. Of course I hit my wife. She's a bitch. I mean, that's an extreme example, but sometimes happens. Absolutely sometimes happens. Of course I got drunk. My wife's a bitch. Or of course I slept with that guy. My husband's an asshole. None of those reactions is justified. I don't care how the other person behaves. And the whole Me Too movement, I'm so happy to have it have happened, is about that. Even if a woman comes in and she's being flirtatious in order to get a job, that does not warrant the overreaction of raping her. And that used to be completely justified in our society. Well, of course I raped her. She had on a short skirt. She was acting sexy. Of course I raped her. She was asking for it. So this kind of goes into another whole podcast topic of the inevitability of our reactions. But for today, I just want to say that we overreact all the damn time. We overreact because we justify our reactions to everything instead of realizing the damage that those reactions do. So let me get back to my stories. So my daughter came home with a D in math, let's say, and I had all these internal reactions. And what were they overreactions? Well, yeah, they were overreactions. It didn't happen to me. This is another whole aspect of it, is her grades are her grades. Her grades are her life. It didn't happen to me. And the less reactive I can be, the more she realizes that it's about her and not me. And I've said this to clients so many times, I'm hoarse from thinking about it. That when you scream and yell at your kids or punish your kids or, whatever, overreact in some way about your kids' grades, what's happening there is that your behavior and your intensity, your reactivity is what they're going to focus on. Now, they might temporarily try to do better, quote unquote, to avoid your wrath, but it's teaching them to only do what they need to do to avoid someone's wrath. It's not teaching them to take accountability for what happens in their own lives and to determine what makes them feel good. They only know what makes you feel good because you make it perfectly clear what makes you feel good. And I don't know if I'm making sense to you guys here, but, parents tend to be more invested in their kids' behavior than the kid is. And when that happens, when the parents have a lot of reactions about the child's behavior, then the child just focuses on the parents' reactions and they're not learning themselves what's important to them. So that's another very big, and it's the same thing for other kinds of relationships too, is when you have big reactions to things that happen, people are often focused on those reactions instead of their own feelings. So let me continue with the example of my daughter and her D. After I took a breath and, was able to calm myself down, we talked about how she felt about it. And, I'll go into the steps in a minute about all the different steps to this process. But the fact that I did not have a big reaction to it outwardly, only inside, and then I calmed myself down, helped me to be able to focus on asking her how she felt about it. So I'm going to leave the outcome of that for a little bit later when we're talking about the actual steps. But I wanted to make that point really clearly about the reaction of the parents can become the thing that the kids are focusing on instead of their own feelings and their own motivations and their own accountability. Another example is, let's say a guy comes home and tells his wife that he lost his job. Now, this would be one of those things where somebody would say, well, of course I'm upset. My husband lost his job. But the same thing applies, guys. The same thing applies. Him losing his job is not about you. And even if your very existence, your bills and everything are all paid by his job, it's still not about you. The experience is about him. And it's so difficult in situations like that to stay calm and to not say, oh my God, what's the matter with you? Don't you know that we can't pay our bills? What are you thinking? Why did you let that happen? Or even, your boss is such an asshole. Why did he do this to you? Whether you're blaming your husband or you're blaming the boss or whatever it is, or you're blaming the president because there aren't enough jobs, whatever is going on in your reactivity that you're blaming somebody for is not going to help resolve the situation. It's not going to help support anybody. It's not going to lead to any place that is good or connecting between you and your husband or your partner. So those are just a couple of very simple examples of times that we can be reactive and we think are perfectly justified in being reactive. And we are, in fact, overreacting. So now I want to get to the actual steps. And I will finish those two examples and show what the outcome could be if we use these steps. Now, I've got lots of steps to offer you, and I've made several podcasts already about different tools that are very helpful to people. And you'll notice a lot of similarities in the first few steps, because noticing what's going on is so powerful. It reminds me of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. The first step is admitted we were powerless over alcohol. Well, you've got to notice first, and that's what they're saying is, you've got to admit there's a problem. So that's the first step. You could say, admit there's a problem, but the way I have stated it is that you notice your internal feelings in response to a situation that's happening. The first step is noticing, being aware. And guys, the more aware you can be of what's going on inside you in response to the world, the better outcome you're going to have in every situation. I don't care if it's with your kids, with your husband, with your friends, with your job, with your boss, between you and God, whatever relationship we're talking about. The more aware you are of your internal feelings in response to a situation that's happening, the better outcome you can have. So that's the first step. And then you take a pause. And that's another very powerful step, is pause and intervene with and stop your reactivity, however it's showing up. And again, let's go back to my daughter and her grade. I was having a reaction internally. And if I wasn't careful, I knew that reaction was going to come out. And so I was able to notice that, and I was able to take a pause, take a breath, focus on relaxing my body and stop that reaction in its tracks and shift gears. And the third step is to take a breath. And as I was just saying, focus on relaxing your body. So after you notice that you're reacting and you pause and stop your reactivity, then you actually take a breath and you focus on relaxing your body. Then you connect to yourself and higher consciousness and expand your perspective and open your mind. And whether you believe in God or you don't believe in God is not my business. I believe there is higher consciousness, and that connecting to higher consciousness helps me expand my mind and open my heart and become much more neutral about any situation, because it helps me put things in perspective. That's what connecting to higher consciousness does for me. It helps put things in perspective. It helps me realize that this is one tiny situation. And you may not believe in that, and that's okay. You can connect to nature. Maybe it totally relaxes you to be at the beach, and it reminds you that you're a grain of sand or a drop of water in that mass ocean. And that's the same feeling. It's the same experience. It helps give you perspective. And so you might use that as a technique where you just connect to the ocean, or connect to the wilderness, to the woods, to the millions and millions of trees that are in the forests. Whatever it is that brings you perspective and helps remind you that we are tiny little drops of sand, drops of water, or grains of sand, and that there is something much bigger than ourselves. Whatever reminds you of that, connect to that in this step. And that will help you open your mind. And then remember always and express outwardly your intention to stay connected to each other and to keep your connection clear. I don't think I remembered to do this at the time when my daughter was 12 years old, but if I had known all of these steps back then, I would have said, the grade is not nearly as important to me as how you feel about it. And I want to stay connected to you. I want to offer you my support. I want to understand what's going on with you and how you feel about the situation. And she said at the time, she said, I don't care. I don't care at all about it. And I said, okay. And, that was pretty much all we said at that time. She did not want to go deeper, and I did not push her to go deeper at that point. And I'm just going to tell you the rest of that story, because it didn't actually go step by step according to these steps, which I did not have developed, 18 years ago. But she came running in a couple of weeks later and said, Mom, I've got a B in math. And she was so proud of herself. And I just said, good for you, honey, good for you. And it completely, of course, contradicted her saying that she didn't care about it. She didn't care about that grade. Of course she cared about that grade. And that's something that we all need to know, is that people don't feel good about themselves when they're not doing well at whatever the task is that they're challenged with, whether it's children in school or people at a job situation. When they don't do well, when we don't do well, we never feel good about it. I don't care what you say. And this is another reminder to us to have compassion. And I am happy, looking backward, that I let her own her grade and her own attitude about her grade. I didn't do what I was saying earlier of having a big reaction and then she would have focused on my reaction. I didn't do that. I was able to stay calm enough and let her say how she felt and let her own grade. And she got the good feeling of doing well. And it wasn't a situation where I ranted and raved at her and then she did well. And then I said, oh my God, I'm so proud of you. Mommy's so proud of you, blah, blah, blah. Because then again, it's all about me. I didn't do that. I said, good for you, honey. You must have worked hard to get that. And then she gets to have her own experience and not be overshadowed by my reaction. So we are at the step 5. Remember and express your intention to stay connected to each other and keep your connection clear. And step 6 is listen without opinions to what is happening or what the person is expressing or experiencing. Be aware of your own prejudices and, your own opinions, and set them aside. So let's go back to the example of the man who got fired from his job. It's like, if you can listen without an opinion, you're on your way to having this situation lead somewhere that keeps you connected and that is supportive to him. Number 7, go toward the situation with a neutral attitude of inquiry. So, let's go toward the husband in this situation where he got fired and offer our support. Ask, what happened? What happened, honey? In a very neutral way, and listen to him talking about it. And he may say, I am so bored with that job. I've got to admit that I wasn't doing a good job anymore. And I feel terrible about it because I should have planned better and not just started slacking off and getting fired. And, you may totally agree with him, but rather than reacting and saying, yeah, you're an idiot, and now you've jeopardized our whole family, that is not going to help. And if you then can say, what is your plan? I can totally understand why you'd be bored with that job. What is your plan? And he may say, what, I've already got a lead on another job, and that's part of why I slacked off, because, I've heard about this other job in a different kind of situation altogether that I'm actually excited about. But I'm sorry, there's going to be a little lapse in the income for a week or two. And, again, you can be upset about it and say, I am worried about our income, but I totally want to support you in making this career shift. Or he might say to you, if you say, what happened, honey? He might say, what, I have to tell you, I was drinking on the job. And I got fired, because I was drinking on the job. And you might say, I'm so glad to finally have you facing a consequence that's going to make a difference. And he may say, I know I'm ready. I'm finally ready to go to AA and get sober. I realize that I just can't go on this way. And this may be a turning point in your life that would never have happened otherwise. Because if you had just ranted and raved and said what an idiot he was for losing his job, then he can go back to that thing of that we were talking about earlier. Of course I drink because my wife's a bitch. And his defensiveness and justification is all in response to your own reaction to his situation. But if you don't react, then all he's left with are his own circumstances to face himself. Just like my daughter's D in math, she was left with her own circumstances to face herself because I didn't give her any reaction to distract onto. And if you can handle the situation with him losing his job in the same way, with no distractive reaction on your part for him to distract onto, then you can support him to take a look at what really happened and ask him what he plans to do. And that could become a real turning point in your relationship and in your lives. It could become the most powerful conversation you've ever had. It could become the conversation that saves your marriage, because maybe he will get sober, or maybe he will start a new career, or whatever it is. Maybe it will be, it could be a conversation where he says, I got fired because I realized I really don't want to be married. I don't want to have to support you. Whatever the outcome is, it's going to go better if you are not reacting to what he's saying and giving him the opportunity to blame you for it. And if it's the end of the relationship, so be it. You can say, I can understand that. And maybe it's time for me to go back to my career. I'm perfectly capable. Or maybe you've already got a career, whatever the circumstances are. But it's always going to turn out better if you don't resort to reacting. And overreacting is really the same thing. Reacting and overreacting are the same thing. So once you have gone deep and gotten to the place where you really are supporting that person and helping them to get over their shame and guilt and whatever feelings they're having, their anger, whatever it is, and own their own situation, then you can move somewhere, you can go somewhere, there can be some outcome, some next step that again is not sidetracked by you having a big reaction to it. And the ninth step is use the empowerment from this tool to help you relax into life. If you know that you can manage your own reactivity when challenging circumstances happen, if you know that about yourself, wow, that's powerful. That is so powerful. That helps you relax because you know that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay. I'm going to give you another example that's very painful to me, near and dear to my heart. My daughter was a using heroin addict for years, and I was facing the possibility, the very real possibility every single day that she could die. Now, thank God she's over a year and a half sober now, an amazing person. But during those years, it's like I had to ask myself, how can I handle it if she dies? And, it's really upsetting. My sister's son did die from heroin addiction. So it's a real thing that happens. And this, again, is another show that I'm going to do, another podcast I'm going to do on a different day, a series of podcasts about addiction. And I'm going to interview both of them. But I realized, because I have been using this tool for so long, that I trusted that I could handle that without wanting to kill myself, or without wanting to blame myself, or without, giving up the joy in my own life. I knew that I wasn't going to have a horrible reaction. Of course, I would be devastated. Of course, I would cry and grieve and do all of that all those natural steps of grieving and all of that. But I knew I could go on because I trusted myself that I was going to get the support I needed to be able to face that situation in as healthy a way as possible. And that's the power of this step and this tool. And the other tools that I'm offering you is it helps you build the confidence in yourself that you can face any circumstance in life and you can come through it and be compassionate and loving and as neutral as possible and supportive of the people around you. And that's a powerful feeling. That is a relaxing feeling, and we all want to feel that way. So that's all I have for you today, guys. I know this is a powerful tool. I hope you will use this tool. I hope you will email me or direct message me on Instagram or Facebook at Helen Hillix, Hillix, either on Facebook or Instagram. And my email is hhillix@yahoo.com. And I love you all, and I hope these tools are supporting you. From my heart to yours, use them, benefit from them, give me feedback, tell me if there's a topic that you want to hear me talk about, and I will do it. Until next week, I'm leaving you with an open heart and lots of wishes for a great life. And I'll talk to you soon.